The night was cold, the sky was wide and silent, and inside a small hut made of stone and clay, an alien mother sat beside an empty cradle. Her hands were shaking as she touched the wooden edges. Her voice was soft as she sang the same lullaby she had sung every night since the day her child disappeared. Her voice was not strong. It was broken, like a candle flame fighting the wind, yet it carried through the still air. The song was full of love, full of pain, and full of something the neighbors called madness, but to her it was the only way to keep her baby alive in her heart. She rocked the cradle slowly, though nothing rested inside. She imagined her little daughter's breathing. She imagined the small fingers wrapping around hers. She imagined the eyes that had looked at her with pure trust. And each note of the song was like a thread tying her to those memories. The people of the village whispered about her. They said she was cursed. They said she should stop. They said her child was gone and never coming back. Yet she did not stop. She could not stop. Because in her soul she felt something strange. She felt that her daughter was still alive somewhere, far away but alive. Every night the same ritual. She would light the small lamp, sit on the wooden stool, place her hand on the empty cradle, and sing. The words were simple, the tune was soft, and the sound of her voice filled the hut like a ghost that refused to leave. Sometimes when the wind passed through the cracks of the walls, the cradle would move a little, and it looked as if something unseen was rocking it. She would close her eyes then, and for a moment she could believe that her baby was really there, that she had not lost her after all. But when her eyes opened, the cradle was always empty. The truth was always sharp, the pain always deep, and the silence after the song ended was heavier than stone. Still she sang. For 5 nights, 10 nights, 20 nights, even after the moon had changed its shape and the seasons had shifted. She sang because giving up the song would mean giving up hope, and hope was the only thing left to her. The other mothers in the village avoided her. They feared her sadness like it was a sickness. They held their own children close and turned away, yet sometimes they could not help but listen from their doors. And they shivered, because her voice carried more than sorrow. It carried defiance. The truth was that her village had secrets. Secrets that everyone knew but no one dared to speak. Sometimes children vanished. Sometimes families mourned in silence, and no one ever asked why. The rulers above demanded silence, and silence was obeyed, but this mother was different. She refused to bury her voice. She refused to close her heart. Her song was a protest as much as it was a prayer. That night, as the sky was covered with dark clouds and the wind moved like whispers through the trees, something unusual happened. The mother's song seemed to travel farther. It seemed to stretch into the forest beyond the fields, and somewhere in that forest someone was listening. The shadow of a figure moved among the trees, a figure not like the others, not like her people. The figure stopped when the song reached his ears, and he stood very still, as if the melody pulled him closer. Back in the hut, the mother's tears ran down her cheeks as she sang the last lines. She pressed her forehead to the edge of the cradle, her voice breaking, and she whispered her daughter's name, begging the night to return her child. The cradle rocked once more, though no hand touched it, and she froze. Her breath caught, her eyes wide. She looked around, but the hut was empty. Only the shadows of the lamp moved on the walls. Still her heart pounded as if something or someone was near. Outside, the figure in the forest took another step forward. His arms held something close, wrapped in cloth. He looked toward the small hut with a heavy expression. The song had reached him, and the song was guiding him. But the mother did not know this yet. She only knew that her song refused to die, and that deep inside she felt that someone, somewhere was listening. Someone who carried the truth. Someone who might change everything. The neighbors had gone to sleep. The village was quiet, but the lullaby still echoed in the cold air, wrapping itself around the stones, the trees, and even the stars. And as the night stretched on, the empty cradle waited, the shadows watched, and the story that would shake the world was just beginning. The sun rose slowly over the valley, its light spilling across the rooftops of the alien village. The morning should have been peaceful, but the silence was heavy. Not the silence of calm, but the silence of fear. Mothers pulled their children inside before the streets became too bright. Fathers kept their eyes low as they walked to their work in the fields. No one laughed, no one sang. The village lived under an invisible weight, a weight that pressed on every heart and silenced every tongue. The alien mother, the one who still sang to her empty cradle, walked outside with tired eyes, her face pale from many sleepless nights. The other villagers looked at her and then looked away. They whispered, but never aloud. They feared her grief. They feared what it meant. She went to the well to fetch water. her song from the night still echoing in her head. An old woman nearby muttered, "Stop your singing, child, the rulers will hear. They punish those who speak too much." But the mother only lowered her gaze and said nothing. Everyone knew the truth. Children had vanished before. Not just hers, but others too. Yet no one dared to speak of it. The rulers demanded silence, and silence was all the villagers could give. So when her baby disappeared, they pretended it was fate. A tragedy, an accident, anything but the truth. But she knew it was not fate. She had seen shadows that night. She had heard the strange hum in the air. She had felt her baby pulled from her arms by a force she could not fight. And that memory haunted her, even if others pretended not to believe. In the market, the traders avoided her. They sold her what she needed, but did not look at her face. Once a neighbor tried to comfort her, saying, "It is better to forget. You will hurt less," but she turned away in anger. Her voice low but sharp, "I will not forget. I will not stop." Her words frightened the others because defiance was dangerous. Defiance could bring punishment not only to her, but to the whole village. And so they distanced themselves, building walls of silence around her, leaving her even more alone. Yet at night when she sang, some of them listened in secret. They pressed their ears against their doors, their hearts trembling, because her song carried something they all felt but dared not admit. The truth, the wound, the fear, the longing. The silence of the village was not natural. It was a silence forced upon them, a silence built from terror, and the rulers thrived on it. They watched from their towers above. They listened for any voice that dared to rise, and when one did, it was swiftly crushed. Still, the mother's voice carried, not in shouts, not in protests, but in lullabies, and that made it even more dangerous, because a song could slip past walls. A song could touch the heart. A song could awaken those who had been too afraid to remember. One evening, as she returned from the well, she noticed children playing in the dust, their laughter brief and nervous, until a shadow passed overhead. The sound of engines rumbled, and instantly the children froze. Running to their homes, doors slammed shut, and the silence returned like a blanket. She looked up at the sky and saw the ships, dark shapes cutting across the clouds. The same kind of ship that had taken her child. Her fists tightened, her voice caught in her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. She could not show her anger here, not in the open. That night she sang again, louder this time, her voice rising against the silence. Her song told the story of a cradle, of a child stolen, of a mother's heart that refused to surrender. And though her neighbors shook their heads and begged her to stop, she sang on unseen in the distance. The human wanderer heard her song again, the same melody he had followed before. He knew what it meant. He knew the silence of this village was the silence of chains, chains forged by fear, chains that only courage could break. Inside her hut after the song ended, she sat in the shadows, her eyes fixed on the cradle. She whispered, "They want me silent. They want me broken, but I will not give them that. My voice is all I have, and I will use it." Her hand trembled as she touched the wood, but her spirit burned brighter than the lamp beside her. Outside, the village slept in uneasy quiet, but whispers spread, whispers of her song, whispers that maybe the rulers were not as powerful as they seemed, whispers that maybe one mother's voice could awaken others. And in the forest, the human stepped closer, his arm still carrying something precious. He knew the silence of the village would not last forever, because silence cracks when truth begins to sing, and this mother's truth was stronger than fear. The night deepened, the cradle rocked softly without a hand, and though the village tried to remain silent, the echoes of her lullaby carried through the air like a secret rebellion, like the first spark of a fire waiting to rise. Far beyond the quiet village, beyond the fields where alien farmers bent their backs in silence, beyond the hills that watched with ancient patience, a lone figure moved through the forest. He was not like the others. His body was different, his skin pale compared to theirs, his eyes sharp, his walk cautious. He was human, the last of his kind in this corner of the world. He had not come by choice. He had come because his ship had fallen, broken and burned years ago. The sky had swallowed his crew, and he alone had survived. He lived in the shadows since then, moving like a ghost between trees, scavenging food, studying the land, learning its cruel secrets. The villagers whispered stories of him, calling him a demon, a spirit, or a thief. But the truth was simpler. He was a man who had seen too much, and what he had seen was darker than any rumor. He had seen the ships, he had seen the rulers, he had seen the cages where infants cried until their voices broke. Yes, he knew where the stolen children went. He knew the rulers took them not for kindness but for experiments, for cruel designs no parent should ever imagine. He had watched from hiding places as the children were carried away, and each time his fists clenched until his nails drew blood. But alone he could not fight them. Alone he could only save what little he could, and so he carried a secret wrapped in cloth against his chest. Something warm, something fragile, something that breathed softly in the dark. He had rescued one, just one, when the guards grew careless, when the shadows allowed him to strike, and that one was all he could hold on to. The nights were long, and in those nights, he sometimes heard the faint sound of a song. It drifted across the valley, carried by wind. The song was not of his people. The words were strange, but the sorrow was clear. The love inside it was strong, and when he listened, he felt the ache in his own chest deepen. He followed that sound night after night, moving closer to the village, though he kept to the forest unseen. His eyes watched the huts from afar, and each time the song rose, he looked at the cradle of cloth in his arms, and he knew this song was meant for the child he carried. The villagers did not know a human listened. They did not know a human cared. They did not know that in the forest, their grief was shared by someone they had been told was a monster. But he was not a monster. He was tired, scarred, hunted, but not a monster. He was a man who had lost everything. And in the cry of an alien child, he had found something that gave him reason to keep moving, to keep fighting. On one of those nights, as the song rose stronger than before, the human stopped in the shadows, his heart pounding. He looked down at the child wrapped in cloth, her small hands curled, her breath steady, and he whispered to her in his own tongue, "Your mother is calling you." The baby stirred as if she heard, her tiny face pressing against his chest. The song in the air seemed to reach her even through sleep, and his decision grew heavier. He could not keep her hidden forever. He could not raise her alone in the forest. She belonged to the voice that sang. But he also knew the danger. If he returned her, the rulers would know. The guards would hunt them both. The mother would be marked, and the child would be taken again, perhaps never to be seen again. The choice was cruel, to stay hidden and keep her safe in secrecy, or to return her to the arms that longed for her and risk everything. Night after night he walked the same circle in his mind, but night after night the song grew stronger, and his resolve weakened. That evening the moon broke through the clouds, silver light falling on the village roofs. The human stood at the edge of the forest, his figure half hidden, his arm still holding the cloth bundle. The song carried across the air once more, raw, trembling, unbroken, and he knew it was time. He stepped forward. One step, then another, his boots crunching softly against the earth, his heart heavier with every sound. The village was not his place. The people would fear him, maybe hate him, but the song was louder than fear. The song demanded truth. The cradle in the hut was empty. The mother's voice shook with pain. But outside her door a human was coming, carrying the very life she thought she had lost. The silence of the village would soon break. The shadows would soon tremble, because a human among aliens was about to walk into the light. The night was restless. The wind pressed against the wooden walls of the hut, and the mother sat once more beside the empty cradle, her song trembling as it left her lips, her eyes heavy with tears, her voice carrying both defiance and despair. She did not know that beyond her door, steps moved closer, slow, cautious, heavy with decision. A human was walking through the darkness, a stranger, a ghost from the stories, and in his arms was the small bundle wrapped in cloth. A bundle that breathed, a bundle that stirred inside. The mother rocked the cradle with her hand, whispering her daughter's name, her heart clinging to the impossible dream that the song would somehow bring her back. The lamp flickered, shadows crawled across the walls, and in that trembling glow the wooden cradle looked alive again. As if waiting, then came the sound, soft at first, almost nothing. The crunch of boots on the earth outside. She froze. Her voice stopped. The silence inside the hut sharpened, her ears straining. Was it the wind? Was it the neighbors? Or was it the ruler's guards? Her heart raced. Her hand gripped the cradle. She rose slowly, her breath unsteady, and before she could move to the door it opened, the wooden frame creaking, the night spilling in, and there he stood. A human, tall, broad, his face shadowed, his clothes torn from the forest, his eyes burning with something fierce and weary. He looked out of place, a stranger in her world. Yet her gaze did not stay on his face. Her gaze dropped to his arms. The bundle, wrapped tight in rough cloth, moved. A tiny sound broke the air. Not the sound of wind, not the sound of animals, but the sound she had longed for with every breath, The soft, fragile cry of a child. Her knees weakened. Her hands shook. She stumbled forward, her eyes wide, her lips parting, but no words came. Her heart screamed, yet her voice could not. She saw the little face, the familiar shape. The daughter she had buried in her grief was alive. Alive in the arms of a stranger. The human stepped into the hut, his boots heavy on the floor, his eyes watching her, not with anger, not with threat, but with something like sorrow, something like understanding. He bent his arms slightly, showing her the child. The mother gasped, her voice finally breaking. My daughter." The words escaped like a prayer, like a cry, like a miracle. Her hands reached out but stopped halfway. Afraid it was an illusion, afraid the moment would vanish if she touched it. The human spoke, his voice low, rough, tired, yet steady. "She is yours," he said. "I heard your song. I followed it, it guided me, and it brought me here." Her tears fell freely now, her hands trembling as he placed the child into her arms. The warmth returned to her body as the baby pressed against her chest, her tiny fingers curling, her small breath steady, and the mother let out a cry that was half laughter, half sob, a sound that shattered the silence of grief. For a long moment the world stopped, only the lamp, the cradle, the mother, the child, and the human filled the hut. Nothing else mattered. Not the rulers, not the neighbors, not the fear, only the miracle that her arms were no longer empty. But then the weight of reality pressed back. Her eyes lifted to the human, her voice weak but sharp. How do you have her? Why do you carry my child? What happened?" The human's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened with memories he did not want to speak. Yet he answered, "The rulers took her like they take all children. They meant to use her for their cruel work. But I could not let it happen. I have seen too much. I could not watch another suffer. I saved her when they were careless. I have carried her since." The mother's chest tightened. Fear returned to her heart even as she held her daughter close. "They will come for her, they will come for me. They will not allow this," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. The shadows, the night that suddenly seemed full of eyes. The human nodded, his voice low but firm. "Yes, they will come, they always come, but you are not alone now." The mother looked down at her child, her tears falling onto the cloth, her lips pressing against her daughter's head, her voice breaking again. "You brought her back to me. You risked everything. Why, you are not of us. You owe us nothing." The human's gaze was heavy, his words slow. "Because I know what it means to lose everything, and I will not let another feel that pain if I can stop it." The hut was quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of despair. It was the silence before a storm, the silence of choices, the silence of new paths. The mother held her child tight. The human stood close, and outside the village remained asleep, unaware that a miracle had just stepped into one of its huts. But miracles do not stay hidden forever, and in the distance faint lights moved in the sky, shadows that promised danger, shadows that promised the rulers were already searching. The mother pressed her child closer, her eyes burning, her heart fierce. She had been broken before, but now she was whole again, and she would not let anyone take her daughter away. Not ever again. The human stepped closer to the cradle, his hand resting on the wood, his voice low. "The fight will come. Be ready." And though the mother trembled, she lifted her chin, her voice soft but steady. "Then let it come, because I am not afraid anymore." And as the night stretched deeper, the cradle no longer seemed empty, the song no longer seemed lonely, and the story of loss had become the story of return, but also the story of war, for the rulers would not forgive, and the village would soon face the storm. The baby's soft breathing filled the hut, her small hand clutching her mother's finger. The mother could not stop staring, her tears flowing again and again. Every sound of her child was like a gift returned from the grave, but as joy burned in her heart, fear crawled behind it. Her eyes lifted to the human who stood near the door, his face in shadows, his clothes torn, his shoulders tense. He had given her back her child, yet questions weighed heavier than gratitude. She whispered, her voice still trembling, "You must tell me. Why did they take her? What do they want with our children? Why do you risk yourself for me?" The human looked at her, his eyes tired but steady, his voice low and rough. "Because I know what they are. I have seen their work. I have seen the truth no one here dares to speak. And if you are to keep her safe, you must hear it too." The mother held her baby closer. Bracing herself, the lamp flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the human began to speak. "I was not born here," he said. "I came from far away, from the stars. My people once traveled among the worlds. explorers, dreamers, but my ship fell, broken in the sky above this land. My crew died and I alone remained. I learned to survive. But I also learned the darkness of this place. His gaze grew colder. His jaw clenched. The rulers, the ones above you, they are not protectors as they claim. They are takers. They feed on silence, and they steal what is most precious, your children. The mother shivered. The words cut like knives, yet deep inside she knew they were true. She had felt it the night her baby was taken. The hum of the ship, the force that ripped her arms empty. The human continued, his tone heavier. I have seen their towers. I have seen the cages where the little ones cry until their voices die. They use them for experiments. Cruel experiments that serve their hunger for power. They drain them of life, of memory, of innocence. And once they are taken, most are never seen again. The mother's chest ached. Her tears spilled faster. She pressed her daughter tighter, as if holding her would protect her from the horrors painted in his words. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why our children? Why not fight us directly? Because fear is stronger than chains, the human answered, his voice like iron. If they take your children, they break your spirit. If you stay silent, they control you. They do not need to fight you because you will never rise. And that is how they rule. The mother shook her head, her voice trembling with anger now. And the village accepts this. They live in silence while their babies are taken. They call me mad for singing. They call me cursed for refusing to forget. The human's eyes softened. They are afraid fear can bury even the loudest voices. But your song, it reached me. It carried farther than you think. It gave me the strength to bring her to you. Because your song is not just grief, it is truth. She looked at him then, her eyes sharp through tears. But you risked everything. You could have stayed hidden in the forest. Why save my daughter? Why not let me suffer like the rest? The human lowered his gaze, his voice almost breaking. Because I too have lost. I had a child once. Long ago, before the crash. She died in the fire when the ship fell. I could not save her. Her cry is the last sound I remember from my world. I could not save my own, but when I heard yours, I swore I would not fail again. The mother's heart clenched, sorrow mixing with understanding. This human was not only a stranger, not only a survivor, he was a father broken by loss, and in saving her child he was trying to heal his own wound. For a long moment the hut was filled with silence, not the silence of the village, but the silence of two souls who shared the same pain. The mother looked at her baby, then at the human, and she whispered, "Then perhaps you were sent here not by fate, not by accident, but because my song was waiting for you." The human said nothing, but his eyes glimmered with something almost like relief, a weight lifted by her words, yet the peace did not last. Outside the night roared with sudden noise, the low hum of engines, the crack of branches, lights moved in the distance, growing brighter. The ruler's ships, the guards searching, the mother's breath caught. She pressed her baby close, fear rushing back. "They know. They are coming," she said, panic rising in her voice. The human's hand moved to the crude weapon strapped to his side, his voice steady. "Yes, they will come, they always come. But this time you are not alone, and this time, we fight." The lamp flickered. The baby stirred, the cradle stood waiting, and in that small hut, grief had turned to truth. Truth had turned to defiance, and defiance was about to become the spark of rebellion. The night was no longer quiet. The hum of engines grew louder outside the village. Lights cut across the sky like knives. Shadows moved along the ground as ships circled above. The ruler's guards were searching, and the villagers who had been asleep woke in fear, pulling their children closer, closing their doors tighter inside the hut. The mother clutched her baby against her chest, her heart racing so fast it hurt. The human stood near the door, his weapon gripped in his hands, his eyes sharp, his breath calm. He had seen this before, he knew what it meant. The rulers had discovered what he had done, and they were coming to take the child back, the mother whispered, her voice trembling. "They will find us. They will take her again. I cannot lose her again. I cannot." Her tears returned, her body shaking, her song now replaced with terror. The human turned to her, his voice low but steady. "You have a choice. You can give her back, stay silent, and they will spare you. You will live broken but alive. Or you can keep her, fight for her, and risk everything. They will come after you. They will come after me, but we will not be silent anymore." The words cut her heart. She looked down at her baby, her tiny face soft and peaceful, her small hand curled into her mother's dress. The thought of losing her again was unbearable, but the thought of giving her up willingly was worse than death. Her voice cracked. If I fight, they will kill me. They will kill her too, the human shook his head, his eyes burning. No, they will not kill her. They need the children. They use them, they keep them alive for their own purposes. But they will strip her of everything that makes her yours. They will erase her laughter, her memory, her future. They will take her soul. Is that the life you want for her? The mother closed her eyes, tears streaming, her body shaking as if torn in two. Outside, the engines roared louder. Lights flashed against the window. The neighbors whispered in fear, some cursing her. She brought this on us, some begging, please stop. You will bring ruin. She opened her eyes and looked at the cradle. Once empty, now filled with hope again. She remembered the nights she sang to it, the lonely rocking, the endless tears. And she thought of the silence the rulers had forced on them all. Her breath steadied, her tears slowed, her arms tightened around her child. Her voice trembling but stronger now. No, I will not give her up, I will not let them win. I will fight, the human nodded, his grip on the weapon firm. Then we fight together. The baby stirred in her arms, her small cry breaking through the tension. The mother kissed her head, whispering a promise. I will not let them take you again, not while I still breathe. The ground shook as the ships landed at the edge of the village. Heavy steps echoed as guards in dark armor spread out, their lights scanning every hut, every door. Villagers cowered inside, praying the search would pass them by, but they all knew the rulers always found what they sought. Inside the hut, the mother and the human prepared. He handed her a small blade, crude but sharp. She hesitated, her hand trembling. I am no warrior, she said, but he looked at her with fire in his eyes. You are a mother, and that is stronger than any warrior. The words lit something inside her. She felt the truth of them. She was not trained to fight, but her love was a weapon. Her grief had turned to fire, and her fire would not be silent anymore. The footsteps grew closer. Voices outside barked orders. Shadows fell across the walls of the hut. The mother pressed her daughter close, her song rising again, not soft this time, but strong, defiant. The lullaby that had once been sorrow now sounded like a battle cry. The villagers listened from their hiding places, their hearts pounding. Some covered their ears in fear, but others felt the fire spread. Her voice was shaking the silence they had lived under for too long. Her voice was daring to speak where they had stayed silent. The door rattled, the guards outside, their voices commanding, Open! Surrender the child. The mother's eyes met the human's, both of them breathing hard, both of them knowing what was coming. She whispered, If I fall, protect her. And he answered without hesitation, You will not fall. Not tonight. The door splintered as the first blow struck. Light spilling through the cracks, shadows looming larger. The mother stood tall with her baby in her arms, her blade shaking but raised, her voice still singing, the human ready beside her. The silence of the village was breaking. The chains of fear were cracking, and in that moment, the choice was no longer hers alone. It was the choice of everyone who heard her song, the choice to remain silent or to rise. And as the door burst open, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what a mother and a human would do against the power of rulers, waiting to see if one voice could ignite many, waiting to see if love was stronger than fear. The door cracked wide open, splinters of wood falling to the floor. The night air rushed inside the hut, and behind it came the shadows of armored guards, their weapons glowing in the dark, their voices sharp and cold. Hand over the child, they commanded, their words like blades. Do this, and we will spare you. The mother stood tall, her baby pressed against her chest, her body trembling but her eyes fierce. Beside her, the human raised his weapon, his face set like stone. The light of the lamp caught his scars, every mark of survival on display. The guards stepped closer, their boots shaking the floor, their armor gleaming. The villagers hiding in their huts held their breath. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak. And then into the silence, the mother's voice rose. She began to sing, not the broken, sorrowful lullaby of before, but a voice filled with strength, a voice that shook the air like thunder. Her song carried beyond the hut. It spilled into the village streets. It wrapped around the houses. It climbed into the sky. It told the story of love stolen and love reclaimed, of silence broken, of hope unchained. The guards faltered, their steps slowed. They had expected tears, surrender, fear, but not this. Not a song. Not a mother who sang while facing death. The human's eyes widened as he listened. He had heard her song before, soft and desperate, but now it was different. Now it was alive with fire, and he felt his own chest burn with it. his grip on the weapon tightening, his heart pounding with her rhythm. The villagers heard it too. Mothers pressed their children close. Fathers clenched their fists. Old ones who had seen many vanish felt tears rise in their eyes. Her song reminded them of all they had lost, but also of all they still had. One voice became two. The human lifted his head and added his own, not in her words but in his own. Rough, foreign, but strong. The harmony strange yet beautiful. The sound of two worlds united. The guard shouted again. Their voices harsh. Silence her. Take the child. They raised their weapons, but the villagers were moving now. Doors opened. Feet stepped into the streets. Voices joined the song, one by one, then 10, then 50. The night filled with music. A river of sound breaking through the silence that had ruled them for so long. The guards hesitated, their eyes scanning the crowd, their orders slipping from their tongues because they had never faced this before. Not resistance of weapons, but resistance of voices. The mother's song grew louder. Her baby stirred, her small eyes opening, her tiny mouth moving as if trying to echo the sound, and the mother's heart blazed brighter than any flame. The human stood firm, guarding her, his weapon ready. But in his chest he knew this was the moment he had dreamed of. Not just saving one child, but awakening a people. Not just breaking a cage, but burning it. The guard stepped back, uneasy. The sound was too strong, too united. The villagers no longer bowed, no longer hid. They were lifting their heads, their voices rising like a storm. And then, for the first time in memory, the ruler's power shook. The baby cried out not in fear, but in life. Her small voice carried through the hut, blending with the song. A cry that was not silence, a cry that was hope. The mother's tears fell again, but now they were tears of strength. She sang louder, her voice unbroken, her blade steady in her hand. You will not take her. Not again, she whispered between verses. The guards retreated a step, their leader barking orders. But their discipline cracked, because fear no longer belonged to the villagers. Fear now belonged to them. The human looked at the mother, his heart heavy yet alive. You have begun something they cannot stop, he said, his voice firm. This song will not end with you. The villagers closed in around the hut. No longer silent, no longer afraid, their voices rose until the night itself seemed to tremble. The guards turned, realizing they were outnumbered, not by weapons but by will. The mother's song became the anthem of the village. The human's voice, the echo, the baby's cry, the spark, and together they lit a fire that could not be put out. The ruler's ships in the sky pulled back, their engines whining, their lights dimming. They had the power to destroy, but they could not destroy every voice. They could not silence a song that had already spread. When the night ended, the dawn came bright. The village stood in defiance. The guards gone for now, the danger not finished, but the silence broken forever. The mother sat by the cradle, no longer empty, her daughter sleeping peacefully. The human stood by the door, watching the horizon, ready for what would come. And as the sun rose, the village sang again, not in sorrow, but in hope, because one mother's voice had awakened them all, because a human had stood beside them, because a child had lived. The war had not yet begun, but the first battle had been won, not with blades, not with fire, but with a song that promised the rulers their silence was broken, a song that promised their chains would not hold forever, a song that promised freedom. The mother looked at her child, her heart strong, her voice ready, and whispered, You will grow in a world that sings, not in a world that fears. And the cradle rocked gently, not empty anymore, but full of life, full of promise, full of the song of hope,